While the sea's influence on the architecture of Mumbai has been talked about and has been documented and written up extensively, I would like to present a more holistic view of its impact in determining the city as it is today. The title of this lecture restricts the sea and its influence to the architecture of Bombay, but I would like to extend this conversation beyond that and talk about the many layers of influence that the sea has had on the city's development and then on the city's architecture. Um, Bombay port, as we all know, has been, a gateway for trade, and it has influenced the city in many more ways than we can imagine. The influence on modern architecture is obvious, particularly as reflected in the Art Deco modern heritage. But it is, as I mentioned, it's the way it has shaped the city, its people, is probably far greater than what we have acknowledged. Uh, and it impacted not just the architecture, as I said, in the built form, but also culture, design, education, and a host of other influences. Governor Anier noted as early as December 1673, where he called the Bay or the Port of Bombay as certainly the fairest, largest, and securest in all these parts of India. And you can see from this quote taken from uh, article he wrote in 1673, how early the British identified the opportunity that was represented by Bombay by its location and by its location in Asia, and also how it could be potentially a gateway to the East and also a gateway to the West. In 1915, Mr. Karkaria wrote that the harbor unites every possible desideratum of a great seaport. So it is ease of access and egress, excellent anchoring, is capacious beyond the utmost probable demands of commerce. And of course, owing to the great rise and fall of tides, is admirably adapted for docks of every description. Um, the development of the city has been influenced by the sea, but it has also been influenced significantly by the migration of people. Uh, that migration of people, which originally owes itself to Bombay's hosting place as a port, was essentially what determined the city's cosmopolitanism. And as you can see in this uh, quote from 1677, when Gerald Lanier, very far-thinking and high-thinking governor of Bombay, provided privileges of religious tolerance, which doesn't seem like something that would be very relevant at that point in time, but effectively it gave people who were prosecuted because of caste the ability to think of moving to Bombay, irrespective of their religion or their age or their sex. And they were assured that they would not be compelled to embrace Christianity. Um, in 1814, you can see that the Court of Directors had stated that the exercise of a mild and good government to encourage people from all parts to come and reside under their protection, impartial administration of justice, and that every facility might be afforded for the new inhabitants to build themselves habitations. This, of course, was beyond the fact that the city offered opportunity, jobs, and economic security. Uh, In 1921, the census superintendent, as you can see, noted that people migrated from Thana, Kutch, Surat, Pune, but that had long been saturated. And now there were people coming from Punjab, the northern part of India, and what is true even today, they did not bring their women folks. So they were migratory people. They came, they worked, they went back to till their fields. in the monsoon and then came back again to continue working. And Bombay now draws its factory labor from two sources by the sea, from Ratnagiri and from the Deccan, especially Ahmednagar, Pune, and Sholapur. Um, Interestingly, it was not just the migration of people into Bombay, but it was also uh, the fine line that was so sharply drawn in the rest of India between Englishmen and Indians. But in Bombay, that line is so faint that you can see in this edition of the Times of India and the Times in 1911, it stated that Englishmen and Indian, Parsi and Mohammedan, Jew and Hindu met in daily and intimate commercial dealing. And what I'd like to highlight here is the second part over here, where they say they sit side by side in the hall of the municipality and the senate of the university. This is very significant because it actually reflected a, a, a democracy that did not differentiate based on caste, color, or creed. And people participated in the building of a dream called Bombay in the municipality and in providing education through membership of the bureaucrats and of eminent citizens in the university. And even interdining frequently in a country that was so polarized between the British and the Indians was a very significant event. And as they commented, in all these respects, Bombay was nearly a generation ahead of any other part of India. The reclamation of Bombay, of course, was the defining event that basically led to the development of the city. And we all know how the seven islands came together. And I would I would request my guests today from Bombay to bear with me while I talk briefly about this, but it's important from the perspective of our guests who have signed in from the rest of India and also from overseas today. As early as 1932, Samuel Shepherd wrote that, uh, there was water that was passing across four small islands, which were Colaba, Bombay, Mazgaon, Mahim, and Worli. But he said that, when the tide came up, he defined it as the sea by the said beaches had eaten up about one third, and that the best and the richest part of the land was not available. But he felt that it could prove of great advantage and could be recoverable. In 1926, the committee appointed by the government of India commented that, Bombay owes everything to successive reclamations. That, of course, is an open-ended statement, and one can choose to read it either way in terms of all the development that it permitted Bombay, or also the many costs that it took upon the city. Uh, and it was the narrative of reclamation could merit an entire documentary. It's a complex story of corruption, of cost overruns. Reputations were built, reputations were brought down. There was poor planning, and there were many abandoned projects. Uh, K.F. Nariman and Manu Subedar were some of the strongest critics of the Back Bay Reclamation Scheme. And as you can see here, he said this scheme will do irremediable harm to the interests of the future generations and even of the present generation. This map shows you the seven islands. So you can see the portion in black and white hatch is all water. And you can see Mahim, Parel, Mazgaon, Bombay, Worli. Progressive reclamations from 1784 when the Hornby Vellard was reclaimed, the Colaba Causeway in 1838, the Eastern Dockyards in 1858, and then the Back Bay Reclamation Scheme that began in 1860 and continued all the way up to 19, late 1930s and 40s. This image is a lovely image taken by A.R. Hassler. It's taken in the 1930s, and you can see the oval Maidan in the foreground. And in the background, you can see Native Town, as it was called, and you can see the extent of congestion and how closely packed all the buildings were. There were narrow roads and lanes. Uh, it was a city bursting at the seams. And in the north, uh, sorry, in the top right corner of your picture, you can see the a partial image of the port of Bombay. Um, and this yellow line and everything south of it, which is now what we call the Back Bay Reclamation, was the Arabian Sea. So the sea actually came up all the way to Logal Maidan. And this portion that you see is basically all reclaimed land. Even today, we're in 2021, the development plan 2036 still talks about reclamation, and I'm not talking about the coastal road. This is a proposed reclamation in Cuff Parade, and as you can see, you have Nariman Point over here, and you have Cuff Parade over here, and there is a proposal to reclaim this entire uh, portion of the sea, and there are plans to probably have, a gateway and a landing point here and a Shivaji statue. So the story of the pressure and the sea taking and Bombay growing on from the sea continues even to this day. Um, the influence of the sea also was influenced by the port because luxury liners came to Bombay. And there was a host of migration of influences that came about, picture palaces, as we called them at that time, uh, Hollywood style cinemas, the automobile, and a whole new lifestyle came to Bombay. Uh, Here you can see, the large sailing ships, that ocean liners that came to Bombay. Streamlining is beautifully defined in this cover of the popular science magazine, which was the cover in, I think, 1934. At the top, you can see the SS Normandy in New York Harbor. And this is a lovely picture of the Queen Elizabeth, which was part of the Cunard White Star Line. And it was a stylistic watershed in design that came at the same time as the International Exhibition of Decorative and Industrial Arts that was held in Paris in 1925. And it brought to the public attention the sleek lines and opulent materials of Art Deco and modernism. The streamlined liner, which you can see here, was a perfect icon of the machine age. It was naturally in tune with this aesthetic. And coupled with this was its velocity of being able to move across entire oceans at great speed. Uh, Bombay as a port city was affected by the excitement generated by this new ocean liner. And they epitomized, modern elegance. Their grandeur was celebrated in Hollywood movies. And they were called floating deco palaces that went from port to port across the world, showing and exposing the world to a new, modern, refined elegance and a whole new design style. Um, this shift that you can see was basically making Bombay a port of call en route to other destinations in the East. The culmination of all these influences resulted in the features of these steamships being manifested in many Bombay buildings. Uh, and they contain porthole windows and ship deck style railings and observatory towers. Um, the cinema house or the picture palaces of Bombay are huge landmarks. These modern cinema houses brought modernity to all class of citizens. If you notice, and for those of you who are familiar with Bombay, they're all strategically located at major chalks. So the chalk is a junction where you had, a confluence of anywhere between 4 to 5 major arterial roads. Uh, and those of you who know Regal Cinema, it's located at SP Mukherjee Chalk, and you have the Prince of Wales Museum over there, and you have the National Gallery of Modern Art, and you have the Sailor's Home. It's a major junction. And these cinemas didn't just come up there by chance. It was all by design and planning that they should be located at venues which would be prominent, which would catch the attention of people, and which would uh, provide ease of access to them no matter which part of Bombay they were coming from. And they boasted modern amenities that were unheard of at that time. Air conditioning, they had the finest interiors by the finest designers from all over the world, including Europe. They had underground parking, they had neon lights, modern Art Deco architecture, unlike anything the Bombay had seen. And for entertainment, they had movies from the world's biggest Hollywood studios. Um, Metro Theatre was uh, built by their in-house architect Thomas Lamb, who brought this theatre, by design, very similar one in Miami, and suddenly you had the same theatre in Bombay, and also thereafter in Calcutta. Uh, Eros, this iconic theatre at Churchgate, really needs no introduction. It occupies the mind space of every Bombay citizen, and across two to three generations of people who've lived here and grown up here. But it's important to talk about the high thinking that the owner of Eros Theatre brought to this magnificent Eros. Mr. Shivaks Kambata expressed in the inaugural brochure that architect Sohrabji Bedwar was given a mandate to create a cinema that reflected a dream and a vision for Bombay, and not just a commercial opportunity. Such was his thinking, as he said here, that it should be a contribution to the cultural development of the city. And it was people like Mr. Kambata and others who had traveled abroad extensively, seen what the world had to offer, and thought that Bombay deserved that and built it not for competition or, as he says, for profiteering. Um, Bombay's development, the reclamation, created a fabulous infrastructure. In this image, you can see this is an advertisement for Shell. You can see a marine drive, and you can see the number of vehicles that are parked over here. Uh, and you can see the width of Marine Drive. Just the road was 100 feet wide. The promenade on the left is 60 feet wide. You had a vista of 35 Art Deco buildings, consecutive one after the other. And people in the city embraced this modernity and prosperity, and the infrastructure that came with it, which was very well thought out and very well laid out. And the automobile represented a huge aspiration for all the successful traders and businessmen. And in this picture, thanks to our friend Carl Goat, he's identified, so many iconic brands, including the Sunbeam and the Hillman and the Dodge. And if you notice here on the left, there are cars that are double parked and some even triple parked. And we were very curious why there was so much traffic captured in this advertisement. And we uh, found out later that there was a cricket match going on at the Brabant Stadium, which we now know as the Cricket Club of India. And therefore, there were so many cars over here. And Bombay, by virtue of having such a magnificent port and access to both the East and the West, drew many major international giants. I mean, General Motors in December 1928, as early as 28, leased 3.5 lakh square feet of space and set up a plant in Cotton Green. And within 33 days, they had assembled 1,000 cars. And they ultimately worked assembling about 100 cars a day for meeting the demand of automobiles in Bombay. Another major event that shaped the city in a significant way, and it was the first exhibition of its kind and very far-reaching, was the Ideal Home exhibition at the Town Hall, or what we know as the Asiatic Library now, that was held in 1937. And it was the first of its kind, and it displayed every modern amenity that was afforded in apartment style living. So it showcased terrazzo flooring, it showcased the modern bathroom with the incredible marvel of a geyser that provided hot running water on demand, a bathtub, which was unheard of at that time. Uh, People who came to the exhibition saw radios that provided entertainment. It played music and you could listen to the news. And it was placed in an apartment in a room that was called the living room, which was a new social space that had never been defined before. And of course, it showed a lot of furniture and also the refrigerator that allowed you to keep food fresh and also keep it for a long period of time. Uh, these were the influences on the development of the city. And I'll now transition into the influence of the sea on the architecture of the city. Uh, and Bombay's urban planning and its landscape was unique. It responded to the sea. We had not just a north-south axis for the island city, but in terms of development, we had a very interesting east-west orientation. Um, this comment by G.P. Dandekar, taken from the Journal of Institute of Indian Architects from 39, highlights this and says that, if you look at the map of Bombay, you'll notice that it is endowed with a nice long north to south shape. And there is plenty of cool westerly sea breeze blowing over it throughout the year. And if we could design streets and buildings to admit free circulation of air and light, then there's no reason why Bombay should not become one of the healthiest cities in the world. The directions for both these are parallel. And that was essentially the key construct of design of in particularly in the early 30s in South Bombay. In this image, which you can see is the original layout for the Back Bay Reclamation Scheme, which is at the tip of South Bombay, taken from 1946. Over here, you can see the Brabant Stadium and the Cricket Club of India, which was one of the finest cricketing clubs in the world. And over here, this line of buildings is the Art Deco ensemble at Marine Drive. And on this eastern front, you have the first buildings that came up along the Oval Maidan. And such was the design of this, this beautiful area, which you can see is laid out in a very organized grid format, uh, something akin to what you see in Manhattan in terms of the orientation towards a grid of avenues and streets. But it also had these buildings and apartments that basically all faced west to east or east to west. So the apartments on Marine Drive typically have all their facades facing the bay, and every apartment has all their major balconies and windows all facing the sea, so that all the southwest westerly breeze was captured and made these apartments with high ceilings and cool terrazzo feeling extremely comfortable to live in. Likewise, at the Oval over here, these buildings overlooked and had a splendid view of the Oval Maidan. And all their facades again face the Oval. And then, of course, they have the whole 19th century Victorian Gothic architecture, the Bombay High Court and the Bombay University Convocation Hall, etc. on the other side. A majestic conversation between two architectural styles spread over 2 centuries with modernity reflected by the Art Deco ensemble and the Neo-Gothic showing the 19th century buildings. People who lived at the Oval had apartments that had a view of the Oval on the eastern side, and the apartment on the rear actually overlooked the sea. So you could see through when the earliest development at the Oval came. So you can imagine what spectacular views they had. And ventilation enabled them to not have the need for air conditioning till maybe as recently as just 10, 15 years ago, if you just kept all your windows open. As Claude Batley, the eminent professor, academic, uh, and owner of the firm of Gregson Batley and King, said the buildings were designed to capture every breath of fresh air. Um, the building form also reflected this architecture. There was streamlining, curvilinear, and curved facades. Uh, Spectacular buildings that we have taken so much for granted in this city and probably not adequately uh, recognized and appreciated. Suna Mahal, and this is the beauty on Marine Drive, and also is part of our logo, is a street corner building, and these buildings all reflected the turrets on top. This is very interesting design form taken again, inspired by the ocean liner. And the rooftop turret sits like a crown on top of the building. And what's interesting is that it was first and foremost a viewing gallery. So you could come up in the evening and you could go into this protected area if it was too hot or if it was raining. And you had a spectacular view of the bay and of the ocean. And of course, you had the southwesterly breeze to keep you cool. And it was also intended to be a social space. So you came up, you met your neighbors, everybody, you had a drink or you had a cup of tea, and it enabled a social harmony and integration that I think we rarely see today. Uh, Another building here, Empress Court, is now in the hands of a third generation family that owns this beautiful building. And again, you can see the windswept form of the building. This overlooks the Oval Maidan, and you can see the streamlining. And their oral histories have given us fascinating insights into the quality of life they enjoyed. In fact, if I can just go back, I can show you here at Suna Mahal, Mr. Sidhwa, who their family built this building and still reside here, recalled while recording their oral histories. He said, when we wanted to swim, we just walked across the road and swam in the sea, and it was sparklingly clear. And we never knew what it meant to have a swimming pool. Um, this building in Lalchand Mansion in Colaba is a curvilinear delight. I mean, look at these balconies. Rarely do you see this streamlined and curved form that runs from east to west and is so sleek and again gave you incredible access to light and air. Bombay's architecture, because of its location by the sea, was also responsive to the architecture, to the climate and the tropical uh, uh, weather that we enjoy by virtue of our geographical location. So buildings were designed and built in response to the local tropical climate. Architectural design did not confront the environment. Their response was not adversarial. And I think that's the beauty of Bombay's modern Art Deco architecture. Two of the outstanding features that we see every day and we see all over in so many buildings is the eyebrow, which we commonly call in local language chhajja, which was basically just a cantilever that's kind of a ledge coming out over a window. And it blocked out the sun, it provided shade, and it was a design element that accentuated the horizontality of the building. Um, the balcony was an amazing cantilever projection that just stuck out, and you could, again, gave you shade and acts as a viewing gallery when the weather is good. In 1960, N.B. Shroff noted that the various features which are noticed in our ancient buildings are the outcome of climatic conditions. So we didn't build edifices that were completely sealed and reflected the sun back at the neighborhood, was sealed for air conditioning and at in completely adversarial format with the environment. We had chhajjas, which I've talked about, and also perforated jalis. So if you notice, a lot of buildings in Bombay have these concrete grill work, which looks pretty. It's a decorative element, and yet it cut off glare and the sun rays and gave you breeze, light, and privacy. Uh, Shiv Shanti Bhavan at Oval Maidan is, of course, one of the most outstanding Art Deco buildings in the city, beautifully maintained and preserved. And in this, you can see the eyebrows or chachas. And let me illustrate that for you. You can see the yellow lines which I've just shown you. And so this is called an eyebrow, and we call her the eyebrow queen of Bombay because she has these 15 consecutive eyebrows, which overlook. It's a street corner facing building, so this is really the main facade, which is on the corner and not on the eastern axis, which overlooks the Maidan. Um, this is another fine example of an eyebrow that has been used not just for protection, but also to accentuate the horizontality of the building. And this is the residence of the textile magnate, late Seth Gagalbhai Mafatlal. And here you can see, what we call a continuous running chajja. Uh, and you can see how, with the yellow line, you can see how it was used by the architects to highlight the horizontality and give the building an even bigger presence in its horizontal form, because you couldn't go, building rules didn't permit you to go beyond 5 floors. Such was the brilliance of the architecture of Master Sathe and Bhuta that this building accessed two different roads. So the facade that you're seeing here opens out onto Altamount Road, and the rear of this building opens and has access to Pede Road, which of course, as you know, is a major arterial road of the city. And I think it's one of the very few unique properties that has this kind of access. Um, the balconies of Bombay are, of course, we see them all the time, and I hope that you will look at them with a little more curiosity. Uh, you have Commonwealth building here with what I like to call as locomotive balconies. See the lovely rounded form. Look at the two-tone coloring that highlights and accentuates the streamlining and the rounding. Uh, and as much as Commonwealth on your left is about streamlining and curvilinear form, Sunshine at the oval on the right is all about straight geometric lines and recessed balconies. Let me show you here. You can see the ship deck railing on top of the balcony, which is made of wood and sits atop a concrete base. And this, of course, is the eyebrow, the running chacha, that's been put in so beautifully and with such a fine aesthetic. There is also a lot of thematic representation in the architecture of Bombay. We have design elements, we have nautical elements, which include turrets, which I've showed you, viewing galleries, porthole windows, we have ornamentation, and then of course we have different design features that cut across not only typologies, but across centuries. Uh, this building, these couple of buildings will show you the turret form in Bombay's buildings. Kapadia Chambers and Marine Lines located right next to Metro Cinema. And it has these stunning, turret design at the top and beautiful vertical banding in red. On the right, you can see Suleiman Chambers at Colaba, and this turret, if you go up there, you have a grand view of the Gateway of India on the western coast and the whole harbor. And you could actually see all the way to the west and see Marine Drive and the bay over there, depending on which way you turned. Um, the ocean liners inspired these viewing galleries and terraces. I showed you the one at Suna Mahal on your right. Sundar Mahal on the left also has, because many of them are now enclosed because of the changes in weather and the need for air conditioning. But it is a fine example of uh, terraces. This is a building from Vadala. Again, you can see at the top the turret. Um, and then one of my favorite buildings is Hira Mahal, again in Vadala. And apart from the turret, which you can see at the top, uh, you can see an emerging Indian identity that melds with Art Deco. You can see a religious symbol here. You can see the Om sign that's nestled within a classic Art Deco emblem. which is the sunburst. So within the sunburst, you can see how beautifully the Om sign has been placed. And below that, you can see two traditional wicker lamps, or diyas as we call them. And we also had an emergence of native fonts like Gujarati and Devanagari or Hindi instead of lettering only in English. Um, the porthole window is, of course, a very obvious nautical element, and I, I would encourage you to look at the buildings across the city, though these are predominantly found along Marine Drive. So here you have the Sea Green Hotel, another property owned by a third generation family of the Sidwas, and you can see how beautifully they've kept it. They've maintained the two-tone color scheme, unique triangular balconies along the southern facade, and of course the porthole windows, which, as I mentioned, uh, are a nautical representation. And uh, while that was a hotel, here you can see them in a residential building, uh, Sunawala by Master Sarthi and Bhuta, again, very similar to the Sea Green Hotel. Um, At Marine Drive, we also have Oceana, which has two porthole windows over here. And you can see for the first time the naming of the buildings also reflecting their location by the sea. And, you know, you, in Cuff Parade, you have Sealand and you have Chateau Marine on Marine Drive. You have Samudra Tarang in Shivaji Park. And um, if you look at this porthole window with this clever design in it, is very intriguing. I think 2 years back we received a request from somebody who had migrated from Bombay and moved overseas, and he said, "Can you please send us a picture of the building with the spectacles of Gandhiji?" And that really threw us. And I think it took us 6 months till we photo documented Oceana for our archive. And we said, okay, this is what he's referring to. And of course, we shared it with him and he was delighted. Um, Porthole windows are across the city. You can see this one on the left in Churchgate, the other one on the right in Matunga. You can see the beautiful design, and you can see also the use of different materials. So these have metal grills. In this building, Daulat Villa in Matunga, you have stained glass as the backdrop for the porthole window. And of course, as I said, the increasing expression of an Indian identity, which is reflected by the name being written in Gujarati. Um, Here you have two buildings in Girgaon and also in Shivaji Park. And the reason I put so many pictures really is to highlight uh, the form and design influence of nautical elements, and more importantly, to highlight the expanse of the cityscape that covers across every neighborhood. Um, and I hope that this will dispel the notion that you need to visit South Bombay to enjoy the city's architecture. Literally, you could be in any part of the city, and if you look up and look carefully, there is so much to see. Um, this building that you see is the Cotton Exchange. We're all familiar with the crisscross wires across the city. Um, a beautiful building designed by Sykes Parker and Devecha as early as 1938. It was one of the tallest buildings of that time. Um, and the Cotton Exchange building has a visual narration of the city's relationship with trade. We well know the centrality of cotton and its export, and it's how instrumental it was to the prosperity and development of Bombay. This building has a bas relief, which you can see if you look at this image at the bottom, you can see this yellow banding. And this bas relief basically was used by the architects for narratives and storytelling. And you can see here how appropriate it is. You can see on the left women in traditional Indian attire plucking cotton from the cotton fields, and then accompanied by a man again in traditional attire loading a truck with the harvest of cotton. And then, you know, the truck moving on. And then in the continuation of this bas relief over here, you can see the truck has unloaded the cotton, it's being weighed, uh, and then it's being put on a hand cart. Finally, it reaches the dock where it's lifted and then loaded on a ship. And you can see two big ocean liners, steamliners, I think, from the funnels over here, are ready to carry the goods to England. Um, this building, Shireen mentioned, interestingly, this is something I just observed after I put this presentation together, that, it's a contrasting picture. It tells you the rapid changes that are taking place in the urban landscape of the city. And given its insatiable thirst for monetization of land and the demand for housing, look at this skyscraper in the background. And I think you look at two realities of Bombay in this one image. Uh, the reason I'm showing you this picture, of course, is because of this image of the boat that is holds beautifully together in soft pastel colors on the facade of the building. And Meher Marfatia, city historian and writer, in her book Once Upon a City, unraveled the backstory to this and said that, Gul Mistri related to her that the original owner of the building, Burjoji Bharsania, his trade involved transporting grass bales between the seven islands of Bombay and in boats. So the nautical image is again a narrative of the family's business. It's a recognition of the prosperity it brought to them, and of course, the fine building that they inherited. Um, there are many buildings across the city which are just full of nautical and representation of influences of the sea. You can see here at Kutch Castle in Girgaon now, these beautiful uh, sailing boats, and you can see the waves reflected at the bottom, clouds in the sky, and even here in the top, in the grill above the gate, you can see a sailboat with two people in it. So the city and its relationship with the sea is really deep, and it manifests itself in so many different ways. Uh, the tropical location, again, the ocean played such a huge impact on the design. We have stylized forms, ocean waves, sunbursts, tropical flora and fauna, common motifs in decoration, Saraswati Sadan in Shivaji Park. This is a really interesting picture. Firstly, unlike metal, this porthole window design has a concrete uh, imagery set within this porthole window. And you can see here, you can see fish, and you can see corals, and you can see waves, all captured so elegantly in this. And when you walk past it, you might just take it for an opening and not quite appreciate it for what it is. Harun House and Fort, again, you can look at the tropical imagery, this time set in metal. You can see birds, you can see clouds, you can see the waves over here. Here are the waves, and then the sun in the top left-hand corner. And these three, I'm not so sure. I think you can use our imagination, but we figured that these are probably meant to be chimneys on a steamliner or something like that. Lastly, Court View at Oval Maidan has probably the only wave balconies in Bombay. The wave style has been captured in the curvature of these balconies. There are only two balconies on either side of the front facade, so it's just a total of four balconies. No other floor in the building has these. And it has this lovely bas relief in the center, which again has seashells and waves. These are unique. I don't think we have seen these anywhere else in Bombay or in any of the other major Art Deco cities of the world. Lastly, the City Ice building in Fort, again tucked away, uh, indented within the concrete facade is, you can see fish and you can see a lovely stepped pattern concrete grill that flanks the fish on either side. Um, it is important to note that this relationship doesn't just uh, begin and end with the city's modern Art Deco architecture. Uh, the building see here is formerly known as the Sailor's Home. Currently, the Maharashtra State Police Headquarters. It's a neo-Gothic building designed by Frederick Stevens, who needs no introduction. And when you zoom in at the pediment on the top, you can see that, uh, I hope you can see this, but there's a Neptune sitting in the middle. Uh, there are seahorses on either side, and then you have sea lions holding the a pennant on both the sides, and this crocketing design is really done so well. It looks just like waves that are about to break, and they're on both sides. Of course, you have to really to look at this and appreciate the detail of the work is probably best looked at through binoculars or something like that. Um, this is a commercial building at the Bank Street in Fort, and look at the 3D image of this magnificent ship that has been carved into its front in stone, and it's still in immaculate condition, having stood the test of time. This is a neoclassical building. We don't have a date on when it was built. And then, of course, there's Port House. We don't have a good image of this, but this is right here. You can see two sets of boats or steamships that are carved into the front. Um, Very quickly, I think, yeah, we have about 5 minutes more. Um, Bombay is not alone in the way its Art Deco architecture and its relationship with the sea has represented itself and and defined the growth of this beautiful city. If you look to the west and to the east, you have Shanghai, you have Miami, and you have New York and USA. And here you can see the Waldorf Towers Hotel. This image taken from Naveen Ramani's outstanding book on Bombay Art Deco. Very similar. It has a turret on top or a viewing gallery, and you can see the influence of the sea and ships. You have streamlining in the famous Delhi, Jerry's famous Delhi, uh, again in Miami. And it's not just the architecture, but it's also their similarities in geography and layout. On the left you can see Bombay, and on the right you can see Manhattan, and it's really interesting to see the narrow strip of land that defines both these cities. uh, they're both financial capitals. They're both basically cities that grew and developed because of the ports that they had. And they both have, the same challenges in terms of development and the pressure on land. Uh, and they're both stunning Art Deco capitals, each one in their own right. Lastly, I'd like to leave you with an image of an Art Deco villa in Shanghai. You can see the porthole window on the lower right side of this image, and of course, the banding and the grooves and the curved balconies, very similar to what we have in Bombay, and the typical, ground plus one kind of structure. Uh, Before I end, I'd just like to say that, Bombay's architecture exists tenuously. It is ours to keep. While we continue taking from the sea, we should not forget it is the reason for Mumbai's identity and its existence.